I'm Chaplain Jacob Scott of the Oregon National Guard. This is the Hope in the Trenches podcast. Where going forward, I'll sit down for conversations with people who offer interesting and informative perspectives on finding strength for life and work in the trenches, and even improving our spiritual posture. Whether you feel like you're under heavy bombardment or ready to go over the top toward a new objective, it's good to be with you. Living with hope is essential to effective leadership at any level in the military, and really in the civilian world too. Wherever someone is serving as a leader, I think you've got to be hopeful or live with hope. From the young sergeant who's maybe responsible for leading 3 or 4 other soldiers under fire, to the general officer who endeavors to share a vision of success and a sense of purpose with an organization of maybe thousands of service members, civilians, and even multinational partners and allies. Now, for those of us who wear the uniform and have worn the uniform, the call to service brings with it incredible purpose and meaning. At the same time, it can also bring us to intense hardship and bring us face to face with suffering and even death. Which is why, this whole project, the Hope in the Trenches podcast, is about hope. My guests today are 2 incredible officers with deep roots in the Oregon Army National Guard, Brigadier General retired Doug Pritt and Brigadier General Eric Riley, who currently serves as the Assistant Adjutant General for the Oregon National Guard. Brigadier General Douglas Pritt enlisted in the Oregon Army National Guard in 1970 and served for over 37 years. He commanded at the company, battalion, brigade, and combined joint task force level during his career. In 2003, he was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General, serving as commander of the 41st Separate Infantry Brigade. In September 2005, the Jungleers were deployed to Louisiana in response to Hurricane Katrina relief operations. General Pritt was placed in command of Joint Task Force, or JTF, Pontchartrain, with over 3,500 personnel responsible for emergency response operations in New Orleans. When Hurricane Rita hit the Gulf Coast that same month, General Pritt was selected to command JTF Rita and was responsible for emergency military operations in all of southwest Louisiana. Then on the 4th of July 2006, General Pritt assumed command of Combined Joint Task Force Phoenix, with a mission of training over 150,000 members of the Afghan National Army and police forces. The task force consisted of over 7,500 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from the United States and 18 other countries from around the world. General Pritt has received numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, and the Meritorious Service Medal. General Pritt has a Bachelor of Science degree in Management from Marylhurst College and a Master's degree in Business Administration from Boston University. He's completed numerous military courses, including the Engineer Officer Advanced Course at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, Resident Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and the Resident Army War College at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. He served overseas, everywhere from Germany, Egypt, Korea, Australia, Azerbaijan, Brazil, Ecuador, Argentina, Japan, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. And he now snowbirds in Florida and lives part-time in Oregon as well with his wife, Susan. General Pritt, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
General Riley was commissioned as an infantry officer in 1993 through ROTC at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He served as an infantry platoon leader and company executive officer in the California Army National Guard before transferring to the Oregon Army National Guard in 1998. In 2002, he served a rotation on the Sinai Peninsula as a company commander with Alpha 1st Battalion 186th Infantry Regiment. Shortly after returning in 2003, he mobilized and deployed to Iraq, taking command of Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 162nd Infantry Regiment in 2004 in Baghdad. And he was also with General Pritt in Katrina in 2005. General Riley deployed again to Iraq in 2009 as the operations officer for 2162. Brigadier General Riley also commanded the Jungleers from 2017 to 2021, including a tour as the Regional Command East headquarters in Kosovo, as part of NATO's Kosovo Force, or KFOR. General Riley has received numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, and the Meritorious Service Medal. General Riley also holds a master's degree in strategic studies from the United States Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. General Riley and his wife Lori live in Southern Oregon, where he serves as the executive director of the Partnership for the Umpqua Rivers, a nonprofit organization responsible for restoring salmon habitat and monitoring water quality throughout the Umpqua Basin. General Riley, sir, thank you for joining us today, too.
Yeah, Chaplain, it's great to be here.
Well, gentlemen, it's a privilege to have you both here on Hope in the Trenches today. So, reflecting on your careers, gentlemen, why did you join the military? And why did you stay? Because Major Clyne and I were talking about this before we started recording. I think those are two different questions. And I found that personally, as I've matured and served now for many years myself, that the reason why I stayed and the reason why I try to encourage others to consider service in the military are different than the reasons that I joined the military in the first place. Gentlemen, why'd you join, and then why'd you stay?
Well, it's a great question. And for me, it's a simple one on why I joined. I went to junior high and high school with my wife. And so we had known each other for a long time, and we started dating seriously after we graduated from high school. And my soon-to-be future father-in-law was a major in the Oregon National Guard, and he wanted me to make something of myself before I married his stepdaughter. And so he was very blunt with me, as you would expect a military person to be. He said, "You're going to join the National Guard, you're going to get a commission, and you're going to be the type of husband that I want you to be." And so it was a real direct style of leadership on his part. And I've stayed because of the people. I've had the wonderful opportunity to meet some of the finest people in the world, and being in the National Guard over those 37 plus years have given me a sense of accomplishment and community that I don't think I could have received anywhere else. So a direct involvement to begin with, and a long-lasting love affair to continue that membership.
Nice. I like the direct tasking to be the kind of husband your father-in-law wanted you to be. That's pretty cool. All right, so my story is a little different than General Pritt's. My father was a signal officer in the Vietnam War, and my uncle was a helicopter pilot for the 1st Cav Division in the Vietnam War, and I had a couple of other family members that were military service members. And so growing up, the military was just kind of all around me and part of my family history. And, as a proud son, grandson, and nephew, I wanted to potentially take part in that. And, when I was a kid, I was like many of us, playing in the backyard with my little green army man, waging epic battles, and just almost idolizing the war heroes that you saw on TV and heard of at that age. And maybe to avoid the recruiter calls, I just decided I was going to become an officer and join ROTC. My dad had also advised me that if I did want to join, maybe being an officer would be a better choice, because you got to be involved with planning and making decisions and leading. And so ROTC was in my future for sure. And after 27 years or over 27 years of service now, I can say that, the reason I've stayed and the reason I continue to serve has definitely taken on a deeper and more meaningful part of my everyday life. Being part of something bigger than yourself, serving with brothers and sisters in arms is a privilege and a joy. So, what better job could you have than being part of an organization that's charged with protecting our nation? So there is a huge sense of pride in service for me now. And it is all about community, like General Pritt said. We're a family for sure.
I can I can sympathize with both of you, or I feel I've come to that same conclusion over the years too, and definitely the reasons that I joined, because General Riley, sir, I joined just a few years after you did. I commissioned through ROTC as well, and it was a peacetime army then. Mm-hmm. But even before the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan started, I think I did recognize that the people that I was able to serve alongside were special. And the mission that we had in the military was different. Even when I started connecting with headhunters while I was a lieutenant on active duty, kind of coming up on that decision point to go to the captain's career course or get out, I told myself I'd have to find something that was at least as meaningful to me in the civilian world in order to leave the military.
Right. Yep.
But now, I want to ask you both, gentlemen, kind of what advice you would give yourself, Lieutenant Pritt or Lieutenant Riley. But maybe since we've been talking about why we joined the military, maybe more surprising to me than the fact that there are a lot of young people that just don't even consider serving in the military is the fact that I encounter a lot of parents who have pretty deep reservations about their children serving in the military. How might you share with parents whose children kind of maybe haven't even considered the military, why that might be something worth their consideration?
Well, I'll go first, I guess.
Sure.
I'd like to, in answer to that, touch on something that Eric mentioned, and that is the opportunity that the military, the Oregon National Guard, in my case specifically, provided that you couldn't replicate anywhere in the world. Certainly, coming up from my background, growing up in a small town in rural Oregon, never in my wildest dreams could I imagine the opportunities that I was going to be afforded, opportunities for growth, unique experiences. The list goes on and on that you just you can't imagine, and gives you an amazing sense of accomplishment. And you never know when it's going to take place. It's just like when we got called to go to New Orleans for Katrina, 3-day weekend. On the Friday of a 3-day weekend, called and said, the airplane's waiting for you. Get there as fast as you can. And it's like, what? Yep. And so you never know what's around the next corner. And so the piece of advice that I would give to family as they consider their children for the military would be tell them to volunteer for everything. There's just more out there than you can possibly grasp, and never shirk from the opportunity to take on more responsibility and learn new and different things, because it's an amazing experience.
Well, sir, that kind of flies in the face of some of the first advice you get in the military, which is don't volunteer for nothing, right? Yeah. They tell you not to volunteer for anything, but I think that's incredibly sage advice, because when you consider the impression you make on your colleagues, your peers, your leaders when you're the person who will step up and do the work that no one else wants to do.
Sir, you mentioned growth and experience, different experiences, and I too have had an amazing amount of opportunities through the military that you can't get, and I've never achieved in a civilian career. 25, 26 years of civilian career. It's been one opportunity after another. You're right. You never know where they're coming from. The opportunity to lead, the opportunity to prepare. I share with my coworkers in my civilian world. We're planning to move 400 people around the world, and that's not a big deal to the military, because that's what we do. We are experts in logistics and planning, and it is just unfathomable to some of my civilian colleagues on the things that the military does. And I would also say, just some of the opportunities I've had in the Oregon Guard since I've been here, even the California Guard, just the travel opportunities. I've been to Hawaii for training. I've been to Mongolia and Thailand for training, and Japan. I have had to go to some unfavorable locations in the world as well. But I mean, that's part of service and that service mindset. But I do know it is, and Chaplain, I've heard the same thing from many parents in coaching soccer here in Southern Oregon over the years, and just my kids going through school. They are scared of their children joining the military just because it was a time of war, and we saw some of the ugly sides of war, certainly, on social media and TV daily at times. So I think as a country, people were just scared, of the ultimate sacrifice, I guess.
Well, yes, sir, and we shouldn't discount that either. I don't want to make light of that because I'm a parent as well, and I don't want anything bad to happen to my daughter. But then, yeah, when we consider just what we've been blessed with here in the United States, and yes, sir, I've been to a lot of the same places that we would probably call undesirable, or maybe, and I think that's probably the wrong word, because places that I wouldn't necessarily go on vacation, but I've met wonderful people in those places, and and there's beauty there and beautiful people, and when I reflect on that and what we have here in the United States and what we've been blessed with just from birth here in just being born in the United States, what we're afforded, I think boy, what a privilege and a blessing it is, and the opportunity to give back and to serve our neighbors here in the United States, and to try to give those same opportunities to people around the world is definitely something that every young person should consider.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to piggyback onto something you said, Eric. I think if parents understood the opportunities that their children would be afforded, not only travel, but the ability to meet people from a much different background than them, plus also the accomplishment that they would receive just for their service. But also, you can't pass up the abilities that a person picks up from their military experience in just basic day-to-day life, decision-making process, management of expenses, time and money. And Eric talked about, his civilian friends wouldn't be able to fathom what he did in the military. If people understood those things, I think they'd be jumping to have their children join the military. And yes, there is a certain degree of risk that comes with service, but there's so many more opportunities out there. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, I would agree. The opportunities certainly outweigh the risk. And I mean, just for me, it's been half of my life I've been part of the military, and that half of life is growing and growing in years each year. So 27 plus years of military service. And I have gained so much more out of being a part of the military than I would have had I just had a civilian career, for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, gentlemen, so we've talked a little bit about we've reflected on our service in uniform. Looking back on who you were when you first raised your right hand and first put the uniform on, what's one piece of advice that you might give Lieutenant Pritt or Lieutenant Riley?
Well, from my vantage point, that's the volunteer for everything. Try and take advantage of every opportunity that you're afforded, and don't be afraid. Like you said, Chaplain, most of the time people tell you never volunteer for anything. And I started volunteering when I went to basic training, and didn't stop until 37 years later when I retired. And now I volunteer on the civilian side because I've learned from my military experience how many benefits there are from that, and the wonderful friendships that you create. And my wife and I have friends all over the world that you can't imagine how you ever met them because of the unique circumstances that surrounded that. But because you did meet them, your life is richer. And so I would say go for it all. Try and get as many opportunities you can. And like I said, volunteer for everything in your imagination.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'd piggyback on that for sure. You know, when I came into the military, I wanted to be my loftiest goal was to be an infantry company commander. If I could achieve that, you know, I would have had a successful military career. And one could argue that, yeah, maybe that would have been the case. But if I were to tell Lieutenant Riley one thing, I would share with him that you know, leadership's a privilege and an honor, and it's something that shouldn't be taken for granted or taken lightly. And I always thought to be a good leader, you had to be the smartest person in the room. You had to be the best at every skill that your team had to do or was responsible for. And I would say that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the best at everything. You need to treat your soldiers as team members. And realize that no one individual on a team can make that team successful, unless your name's Tom Brady. I'm pretty sure. But
well, General Riley, sir, that sounds an awful lot like humility.
Well, maybe it is, but I mean, I do remember being so stressed as a lieutenant that I had to have the perfect op order, and I had to have everything. And maybe it was the evaluation process back then, how it's changed. But I was always so stressed out and not looking at my unit, whether it was platoon or company, as a team. I was looking at it as I have to lead this group of soldiers. So getting that team mindset, I think, is very important. And if you focus on the team versus the individual, I think you'll go a lot farther. So that's what I would say to Lieutenant Riley. And then, I mean, the volunteering, take advantage of this opportunity to lead. There will be opportunities, and I was very what's the right word? I made it a point to try to stay in a leadership role in an infantry unit my entire career, and I would tell Lieutenant Riley, don't be afraid of a little diversity. Also,
well, and I think that brings up maybe another piece of bad advice, that you've got to have the right jobs, because I did hear something pretty early on in my career, and I think it speaks to your point, General Riley, sir, that someone told me there's no such thing as a bad job in the military. There's only bad performances or poor performances or subpar, right? So even if it's a position that maybe isn't one of the more desirable jobs or positions in a unit, take that job and do your best. And if you do your best and have the right attitude and the right approach, and you're positive, and you achieve, you're going to get noticed no matter what job you're in.
Sure, very true. Even if it's a job you wouldn't have chosen for yourself, you're right.
Well, I think there's a lot of merit to that. I'll just summarize here real quickly, make this a short story. I served in the engineers for 17 years, and never in my imagination could I expect to be an infantry brigade commander. That thought never occurred to me until I received a phone call saying, can you come to my office for a meeting? And then say a general officer saying, we want you to command the 41st Brigade. And you're like, are you sure you're talking to the right person? I'm wearing engineer castles here, not cross rifles. So you're right, Eric. There are no bad assignments, as the chaplain pointed out, and you're right. You ought to keep grasping at those, the next rung up, and go for the gusto.
Right.
Well, gentlemen, too, when we've been touching on leadership. And we've also talked a little bit about kind of people, young people who might be considering joining the military. And you hear a lot of conversation about young people today, quote unquote, or millennials and their strengths or maybe perceived weaknesses. How did your leadership styles or your approach to leadership have to change over the course of your career? And what drove that? Was it just a matter of the different responsibilities at different levels of command or the positions that you were in? Or did people change over the years? Or maybe a little bit of all of that?
Well, from my perspective, there are two aspects of that leadership style. You talk about change. But I think there's a underlying principle that didn't ever change, and that was always to treat everyone with dignity and respect, no matter what leadership position you're in. And then on the other side of that, there were changes when you go from direct leadership, where Eric talked about, being a platoon leader and, wanting to do the very best job you can for your platoon, to indirect leadership where you've got 7,500 people in your command. And you certainly can't use direct style leadership with 7,500 people.
Right.
No.
Right.
So from my vantage point, underlying principles and values that you always have to adhere to, but then your leadership style does have to be flexible and changeable, because 1 minute you could be talking to people from, in my case, 18 different countries, and 30 minutes later you could be talking to an Afghan general officer one-on-one about what his organization is doing. And so your leadership style has to be flexible and has to be changeable at a moment's notice. So I think the direct, the indirect, the team building, the coaching, all of those things that we in military service have adhered to serve us well, but you have to be aware of what those are. I think the other thing that from my vantage point, I tend to want to be a positive leader, not to take people down, but to encourage and coach them to better performance. The other thing that I think people want from any leader is consistency. They don't want someone to treat the soldier standing next to me one way and treat me another. And so I've tried to adhere to that principle throughout my career at whatever level that is. The other thing from a leadership perspective, and this goes back to something that Eric mentioned, never be afraid to hire someone smarter than you. Right? I believe in that very strongly. And the other principle that I believe in is surround yourself with the very best people. Right. There are great people out there. You just have to go out and find them and recruit them and encourage them to be on your team, and that will serve you well.
Yeah, and I think if you do that, you find that right team, and not trying to be the smartest person in the room, you're only empowering your subordinate leaders to do even a better job for you. So, anyways, Chaplain, I don't have a whole lot different to say. I do believe, as leaders, our style or our approach changes over time. And I think it's the combination of who we're leading, the responsibilities we have, and the situation we're in. Whether you're deployed or in a garrison environment, or you're on a training exercise, or you're getting your PHA done, so you can check the block for your health, your physical each year. I do know that when I did start out, I was trained. I'll say that you need to be commanding. You need to be very direct, and maybe that was a result of Cold War era or Vietnam era instructors. But by nature, I'm a collaborator and one that wants to work with and serve with others. So, over time, as any leader does, they develop and their leadership style changes somewhat. But I think in the end, that consistency piece, I'm the same person Lieutenant Riley was. I've just refined some of my leadership approaches and skills, certainly. And that, General Pritt, you said building that team. And building a team is so much more important than to me, that's the biggest skill a leader has. A good team builder is going to have a command or a unit or soldiers that will do anything, follow them anywhere. And if you pick the right people and build that team, empower that team, they'll go to the end of the world for you, So, and I too am an eternal optimist. So I'm always looking at the bright side of things. And in my time as brigade commander, I had to tell my executive officer to, pull me aside in the office. And if I'm being too optimistic and overreaching our capabilities as an organization, I need you to tell me, because I'll optimize this thing all the way out till it gets crazy. And he did on a couple of occasions. So anyways, that I don't know that I got too much more to add to what General Pritt said.
Well, sir, and you both touched on optimism, and I think we have to distinguish between a naive optimism or a simple optimism and hope. Because having a positive outlook or being optimistic about your chances of success, that's different than simply wishing away failures to plan or to train or to properly resource people and units to do their jobs or to do their missions. What do you think the difference is between just kind of that optimism and having a real sense of hope?
Now we're starting to get deep.
Yeah, deep subject. I was going to say, Eric, I've been going first. You want to go first this time?
Yeah. So, hope. I mean, I think everybody finds a sense of hope in something, and not everybody finds it in the same place. As a Christian, I've got hope in God. To carry us through whatever experience is in front of us. And I think each individual has to find where that, I'll say, deep hope really is. Because yes, you can be an optimist and wish away, the bad weather or whatever the situation may be. But having hope is deeper than that, and it comes from within you. As an individual, I believe initially, and others outside of prayer or God, they'll put their hope in things that are more tangible, right? Mm-hmm. In money or I don't know, fame or and some people find it in that, I guess, but. I don't know. I'm kind of floundering. General Pritt, can you help me out here?
Well, no, I don't think I'm going to add much to what you've already said, Eric. I believe that we all get hope from a wide variety of input. I think that shifts in my situation. Certainly after retiring, I looked to other areas for hope. I learned to look more within myself, and my self-awareness changed dramatically from the time that I served to being a civilian. We all find hope in a lot of different places. One of the things that I had as hope, an initiator with hope within my personality when I served, were the people that I served with. And that didn't change when I retired, but it shifted. it shifted to the young people, because my grandchildren and my experiences with them changed, and that gave me great hope. And the exposure to their friends, some exposure that we get, my wife and I, from volunteering with different organizations where we live, marshaling junior golf tournaments, we've found to be very enjoyable, and it gives you hope to see those kids and their experiences. And it isn't what we read about in media about future generations, and what are their attributes. These kids give you a positive outlook for what the future holds for our country, and not just our country, because a lot of these kids are from other countries. But yeah, and certainly when we served in Afghanistan, the kids there, the young people, gave you a lot of hope, or did me, that because of the values that they demonstrated in spite of the environment in which they lived. So a lot of different things give me hope, but young people are certainly at the center of that, and right now in my retired life.
Well, I think maybe one of the common threads throughout the thoughts that you both shared, gentlemen, is that there is something greater than us, and something enduring, something that transcends just maybe the bad weather today, or maybe I tried something and failed, or it didn't go the way that I thought, the way that I thought it should. But something that can pull me through to tomorrow, and to giving it another chance, another effort, or knowing that there are other people out there that I can lean on and rely on, and that are with me in this difficult time.
Yeah, I think back to being a team player, or being part of something bigger, I guess, is where I would rather go with this. Is finding hope with just in yourself is, I'll say, short-sighted, and whether it's through faith, or through service, or through engagement with young people, I have the same. I see hope in my children, who are just now finishing college and starting their careers. I see hope in the little kids on the soccer field that I've coached throughout the year. That. So yeah, I think it is. It's being part of that, something more than just yourself.
It is, yeah. No, and we do have to occasionally dig deep and try to. And fortitude, I think, is part of resilience, but it's got different sources. Well, and I think a couple of things that you both touched on too is that there is no one size fits all formula for resilience, or what's going to make someone strong and resilient and able to continue and endure. So we've been talking about resilience for more than 15 years now in the Army. Gentlemen, what do you think? Maybe why do we need to keep talking about resilience?
Well, from my perspective, resilience is a matter of successfully completing the mission or not, because certainly nothing goes perfect, and in order to accomplish the mission, you've got to be able to bounce back from adversity. You've got to be able to see setbacks as minor in nature, and not stopping the entire operation. And so I think you've got to have that endurance. I think in particular you've got to have that resiliency in a military environment, because people are shooting at you, bad things are going to happen, and you got to be able to endure that and carry on. And I think that requires a unique set of leadership skills. Knowing your people, having empathy for them and their unique characteristics and what they bring to the organization, And I think your ability to interact with those people in a wide variety of environments, hostile environments, to social environments, and understanding their backgrounds and what makes them important and capable of making a contribution that maybe nobody else can. But you've got to know those people in order to do that, to take advantage and to leverage their unique skills and talents, beliefs, and motivation to accomplish the mission, because they certainly can bring something. You may not know what it is today, but if you know what they are, you'll know better what to do tomorrow.
Yes, sir. And earlier you talked about treating every person on your team with dignity and respect, and I think all of that starts with valuing the people around you as individuals, as people.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Chaplain, if you ask me right now what is resiliency, and I actually wrote this down. It's a mindset with a heavy dose of stubbornness. And we all have different ways of being resilient, and I'll just say as a leader in the civilian world and in the military, as a father, as a husband, I'm more resilient some days than others, for sure. And I think it's that stubbornness that just keeps pushing me to be successful at whatever mission I'm working on. Nobody likes to fail. And for sure, that's not something you just wake up one day and say, well, today I'm going to be a failure. No, but I think it's that mindset where you are going to push through whatever challenges, whatever adversities you face to accomplish whatever you're striving towards. And for me, I think, like I was saying earlier, resiliency, I won't say it comes and goes, but you have better days some days are better than others, certainly. And you just have to understand that, and just because a failure today occurs does not mean you're failing at your mission or you're failing in life. It's just, okay, well, things didn't work out as I had hoped they would today for whatever I'm working on. And tomorrow's another day, and it will be better. It's back to that eternal optimism. It can't be any worse than this, can it?
Well, General Pritt, you touched on this too when you talked about keeping setbacks or, understanding that minor setbacks or maybe a failure, a small failure in something, maybe something didn't go the way you thought it would, keeping that in perspective, or General Riley keeping those bad days in perspective. And I appreciate that honesty, that not, even people that we see as strong and resilient and that have it all together, not every day is like that. But we got to keep the bad days in that larger perspective as well. And if we have a day where we kind of fall off the path or get off the path, tomorrow let's just get back on the path.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. And I think Eric's comments are better than the word I wrote down was endurance, but I like your stubbornness. I think that's a good answer.
Well, Chaplain, I know you and I have said this on a couple of things with a deployment, with a couple of long ruck marches we've done in the past. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. Mm-hmm. And if you treat it that way, a small setback at the beginning of the marathon is not going to be, or even the middle, is not going to constitute failure. It's just a small setback, and you still are striving to finish the marathon.
Right, and how many runs or ruck marches have you gone out on? And if you, I don't know about you, but I just, it takes me a while to get warmed up. So I don't feel good when I start running or start rucking. So if I just cashed it in because I didn't feel good when I started, I'd never get off the starting line. But then you get moving and you make up time and you get loose and you kind of bounce back from a slow start.
Well, and having that goal, whatever it is, 13, 12 miles as your desired end state for this ruck march. Well, okay, yeah, the first 3 miles are rather horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, especially as you get older, the first 5 or 6 miles are horrible. but I mean, it's the end result or the end goal that if you stay focused on that, and endure and use your stubbornness to finish that, you'll be fine.
So since we've been talking a little bit about resilience and kind of what it is in general, gentlemen, maybe for both of you, what specifically, what are some of the practices, whether that's physical fitness or maybe spiritual or religious practices, what are some of the things that help you stay strong and resilient and kind of keep going and stay on the path?
Well, I made a list a long time ago of what those things were, so that I wouldn't forget and stop doing them, because I found in the first couple of years after I retired, I'd forgotten to go back and read a book to try and learn, because in my military experience, I always tried to read 2 books at the same time. One focused on my military responsibilities, whether it be leadership or whatever. But the other was just an enjoyable book. And when I retired, I was so wrapped up in playing golf and other sports and activities that I forgot about reading. And so I went back and made a list. And so I'll just share my little, very brief list here with you. Things I do for my overall health. These are my choice. So I walk, do yoga, read, meditate. I do positive self-talk at least 10 minutes a day. I give thanks and celebrate my successes. And we in the military, we do that more than you recognize when you're serving. But once you transition to civilian life, there isn't that same formality to recognize people and their accomplishments. So you've got to give thanks and celebrate those successes. Appreciate others and share with them your appreciation. Volunteer, and it doesn't matter what you volunteer for. Just go out and volunteer. And the other thing is to give to charities, whether that be directly to people who are less fortunate than us, or to sending money to Africa to help educate young people. Whatever you do, give away. Pay it forward. And then the other thing is to practice my spiritual fitness, my relationship with God. So that's my list, and that's what I do for my overall health.
Well, General Pritt, you've mentioned. Well, I appreciate that you mentioned gratitude, and I've had other guests on here and we've talked about just the benefits of finding something every day that you can be thankful for. Because we can, if we look, it's not too hard to find things that we have in our lives, no matter how bad the day is going. We can find something to be thankful for. But you've also mentioned several times volunteering and helping others, and it sounds like from hearing you talk about that too, that it's not. Well, there's an incredible value in helping and serving others, but as you've talked about it, you receive a great deal of joy and satisfaction in doing that yourself, and I think that makes people resilient too.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get back more than I give. I mean, it's not what I intend. And I am very sincere, and I don't provide people compliments that are unworthy because you're making it up. But to see the joy in people's face when you really do recognize them for something, and they know they deserve it, they've worked hard to do it. To see that gives you a great sense of satisfaction. I
sat in on a resiliency class just the other day, and one of the takeaways from that was to make your praise praiseworthy. Don't just tell someone that, hey, good job, right? But talk about what it was and why that was meaningful to you.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Got to be specific.
General Riley, sir, what are your thoughts on some of those practices, or how do you stay in the game, sir?
I think, when you're deeply, I'll just say I don't have a cool list like that. I wrote a couple of things out. That's thank you, sir. I may steal some of those and add them to a list that I've yet to create.
Feel free.
Because I'm at that time of life now where I am more, I'll say, more reflective than I am looking forward to a long career in the military or in the civilian world. So those are all very good. I think for me, so I wrote down prayer, and I Chaplain, I don't do it as much as I should or even want to. And it's a lot of times as a leader in whatever organization you're leading, you're so deeply entrenched into whatever the 5-meter target is, whatever the challenges that you're working on, that you forget to back out and take a little broader perspective or broader look at the situation, where prayer is very helpful, and just realizing that, okay, this is not necessarily all in my control. It's not all up to me. I'm going to provide my best input to whatever the situation is, but there's a bigger things at work there. And for me, sharing my experiences with others. We've talked over the years a lot of, before resiliency was a big word, PTSD and how the challenges that come with that, and realizing what that is. And for me, part of my resiliency toolkit is to share my experiences, good, bad, and ugly. And Chaplain, very well. And that is very, because it helps me when I'm verbalizing my experiences, positive or negative. It helps me visualize after I hear myself say it, visualize, okay, how could I have done this different? Okay, and maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was too, so I think sharing experiences and just talking it out is a very important part of resiliency, because you find shared experiences with others when you do that, and then you build strength through that bond, that teamwork that comes together. What else did I want to say? I think my priorities are shifting too, with as far as resiliency goes. What I found would provide resilience in years past maybe doesn't as I get a little older, and I think that's just a maturity thing. But I just having some quiet time, spending time alone out in nature. I'm a fish and wildlife guy for my civilian job, so being outdoors is very empowering to me and refreshing. I'll say recharges my batteries. So I got to work. I'm going to work on the list, because this is good. I keep reading. I typed it out while you were saying it, so it's good.
Well, Sir General Riley, there is research that supports just how important that solitude is. Or there've been some books recently written. One of them is called "Lead Yourself First," that talks about the importance of solitude and taking time to reflect. Well, and I can relate to you too, sir, when you talk about prayer and sharing with others. Just as a chaplain, vocationally, of course, praying with others kind of forces me outside of myself and forces me to, it kind of, sometimes it can jolt me out of navel gazing and feeling sorry about myself when, right. When I can come alongside others and share joys and hardships and just, thinking about others, definitely kind of takes me outside myself and forces me to do those things too. That was right. One of my seminary professors told us. He said, God makes some of us pastors just so that we're in church every Sunday, and I feel that way too. Just as a chaplain, it forces me to kind of be who I'm called to be, and I appreciate those opportunities.
Nice.
Well, gentlemen, I guess again, boy, thank you so much for your time, and maybe I want to be respectful of your time and. Maybe just with the few minutes we have left, we always say too that leaders are readers, And so I'm always curious to hear what people are reading. And General Pritt, you talked about this too. The same way I try to have two books going. For me, it's having one that's maybe leadership or management or military related, and another one that's theology related. But for both of you, what books have you been reading recently that you might recommend to any of our listeners?
Well, my recreational book right now that I'm reading is Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. And I think there's some direct tie-in to his words in the book and what we've been talking about today about resilience and spiritual health. And I would just recommend the book to anybody that has any interest whatsoever in those things. Not to mention the goodness of forgiveness that he has demonstrated and talks about in the book, as well as perseverance. He talk about stubbornness, Eric.
Yes.
Yeah, the man was the epitome of that. Just amazing.
Yeah.
The other book that I'm reading, and at the encouragement of my wife, is 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. John Gottman, the author, and it's got some enlightening insights from his research about communication and how important it is. And so those are the 2 books that I would give a recommendation to.
Those are great, sir. And I'm a big fan of Gottman's work and use him frequently in counseling and teaching.
Well, you remember we started this out, Chaplain, you introduced me as an infantryman, so if it doesn't have pictures in it, I might not be looking at it. But 2 things that I have read recently. One is from the Parameters, which is a quarterly U.S. Army War College journal. The most recent publication of that had an article called The Battalion Commander Effect. And this article was largely about, it was only 4 or 5 page paper, but it was about culture and how impactful senior leaders, battalion commander level leaders, can be in maintaining an organization's health, whether that's through strengths or efficiencies or whatever. And it was pretty insightful. And I talked with another colleague, a lieutenant colonel that's still serving, that we're still serving with here in Oregon, and he, we broke it down to the squad and platoon level that that platoon leader has an effect on 38 other individuals in an infantry platoon, and it was very interesting. And Chaplain, for about 4 years now, I've been talking a lot about culture, and it really dug into the culture of an organization, how a leader can really affect that positively or negatively. And the other thing that I recently read, it was this weekend. We see so much in the news about what's going on over in Russia, Ukraine, and that situation, and situations in the Middle East and around Israel. And my wife and I were talking about, we had a discussion about how things in the world are shaping up in the Bible. She says, you should read Ezekiel 38. So I went and read Ezekiel 38, and then I went into full military mode and I got a map out, and I, labeled some of the old Cush and Put and all these names, Gog and Magog, and I labeled it on the map just to create a better understanding. We are in interesting times, certainly in the world, for sure. And it was, I'll say, healthy for me to look at it kind of from a biblical perspective, yet still having my operational military mindset, going in the background. So I'm not reading anything big or deep. I've got a couple little, couple books that are truly just for fun to read, not enriching or growth oriented at all. So I won't mention those, but Yeah, those are the two that came to mind when you posed that question, Chaplain.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for those recommendations. And I was taking notes then. So I appreciate, again, your time and your willingness to reflect on your careers and in your lives of service. And gentlemen, God bless you both. And I pray that we can cross paths again in the near future.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, Jacob, for putting this together. Thank you, Eric. Great. I've learned some things today. I've made some notes, and I appreciate your insightful comments and leadership style. And congratulations to you on your great success.
Thank you.
I know Oregon's not your original home, but you're home now in Roseburg, close to me. I was born in Myrtle Creek, so.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Nice.
Yeah. Nice to have that little few mile away connection. So
yeah, that's cool.
Enjoyed it.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it as well. It's good to hear your voice. It's been a long time, certainly, and yeah, definitely insightful. Hey, Chaplain, you got to keep this podcast going. Or this is good. This is good. Connecting not only people on the podcast, but hopefully people are getting something from it on the outside as well. I know we did here today.
Well, I hope so too, sir, and definitely, even if no one else listens, I certainly have gotten a lot out of the conversations that I've been able to have, and today included. God bless you both, gentlemen. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
This podcast is produced by the Oregon National Guard Public Affairs Office. My prayer for you is that wherever you find yourself, that you might find hope for today and strength for the ambiguity and chaos of life. Blessings on the rest of your day.